the 1980s, my childhood was upended by my parents' divorce. Custody was awarded to my father, and we relocated from our familiar surroundings to a new life in the southern part of the East Coast. We spent a couple of years there, during which my father met and eventually married a younger woman. Shortly after their marriage, my father, who had never harbored much affection for his military career, decided to leave the service. Given that his new wife had roots in his original hometown region, he deemed it fitting to move back there. To fully grasp the circumstances of the event I'm about to describe, a bit of backstory is necessary. It was my mother who had initiated the divorce, and my father, unfortunately, carried a significant amount of resentment. He harbored a lingering affection for my mother, even while married to my stepmother. Despite my mother's consistent payment of child support, funds which my stepmother often diverted for her personal use, my father imposed strict limitations on our contact with her. Any display of interest in speaking with our mother, or maintaining any form of relationship with her, was met with relentless emotional pressure. He would persist until we feigned a complete lack of interest, effectively forcing us to abandon any hope of communication. My stepmother's parents resided in Wheeling, West Virginia, a location roughly an hour and a half from our new home in Ohio. With no other family members living nearby, our visits were exclusively to them. Our daily existence was primarily rural, confined to the quiet solitude of the countryside. This context is crucial in understanding why I found myself in Wheeling on the day in question. I desperately missed the opportunity to speak with my mother, but direct phone calls from our home were fraught with risk. Even if my father wasn't physically present, the phone bill would inevitably reveal my attempt at contact. Therefore, I devised a clandestine strategy. During our visits to my stepmother's relatives in Wheeling, I would take walks under the guise of exploring the town. I would seek out a payphone situated at a considerable distance from the house, ensuring minimal risk of detection. From there, I would place a collect call to my mother, and she would promptly call me back, allowing us to engage in a private conversation. In retrospect, I recognize the inherent danger of a 12-year-old child wandering the streets of Wheeling during that era. While I haven't returned to the city since the 1980s, I recall it being a particularly rough and unforgiving place. However, the prospect of speaking with my mother outweighed any perceived risk. On this particular day, I followed my usual routine, venturing to the payphone to initiate contact. Our conversation lasted for approximately an hour, and as it drew to a close, I noticed something that triggered a wave of apprehension. My stepmother was driving down the street, an unusual occurrence. Being a 12-year-old child under the authority of sometimes difficult and possessive father, I feared the repercussions of being caught speaking with my mother. To avoid being seen, I hastily ducked into a nearby alleyway. Unsure of whether my stepmother was actively searching for me or simply passing through, I decided to navigate through the alley and take an alternate route back to the house. As I was walking through the alley, preparing to turn a corner, I heard a sharp, distinct sound, a gunshot. It was unlike any gunshot I had previously encountered, not the distant booms of hunting rifles in the countryside. This sound was immediate, close, and unmistakably violent. Looking back towards the source of the sound, I saw a man lying on the back porch of a house with another man standing over him, holding a gun. I was in a state of shock, completely unprepared for the scene before me. Just as I was beginning to process what I had witnessed, the man with the gun turned and noticed me. He appeared equally surprised by my presence. He made a motion as if to move off the porch, and I, seized by fear, turned and fled. I ran back to the main street, sprinting at full speed until I reached the relative's house. Once inside, I insisted that they call 911 immediately. My testimony was required in court, and fortunately, the man who had been shot survived the incident. The shooter, however, was convicted and sentenced to prison. The event left an indelible mark on my childhood, a stark reminder of the unpredictable nature of life.